Welcome to EVTN News. I have the news about the Dubia Cardinals. I'm just messing with the settings here. They're changing things up on YouTube, and sometimes it's a little bit tricky. But I'm going to get to the Dubia Cardinals later. I'm going to start off with some of the other news from the past week. German bishops met before the synod. So as German bishops wrapped up their plenary meeting on Thursday with a final press conference amid tensions over LMNOP blessings and a whole host of underlying issues, the focus was clear. All eyes were turned toward the fraught relationship with Rome and the forthcoming synod on synodality. Bishop Georg Batzing of Limburg, president of the German Bishops' Conference, took public issue with the Apostolic Nuntium in Germany, Archbishop Nikola Eterovic, for reminding the German bishops of statements by Pope Francis on anthropology, including gender nonsense. Okay, so they met. The German Bishops' Conference met last week, just before the Synod, so that was interesting to note. And we'll see what comes of that. There's going to be plenty of news within the next several weeks, I'm sure. I can assure you of that. Steubenville's Bishop Geoffrey Monforton, aged 60, was demoted on September 28th to an auxiliary bishop of the Detroit Archdiocese. Monforton was ordained a priest in Detroit in 1994, so he's returning back to where he was ordained. A year ago, he announced a possible merger of Steubenville and Columbus dioceses. After a clergy revolt, the merger appeared to be shelved. Steubenville is known for its conservative Franciscan University. The Pillar reports that there have been financial problems and mismanagement, to say the least. In 2020, a former vicar general was convicted of embezzling the embezzling of hundreds of thousands of diocesan funds. The future of the Steubenville Diocese will be something to watch for in the near future, as the merger now appears to be a possibility with the departure of the bishop. Because now there's no bishop, and so the Vatican could appoint a new bishop, or they could merge the diocese. It clears the way for this bishop to get what he wants. Of course, apparently he wasn't the most responsible with managing money, which is why there was a revolt from his priests. But that's also going to be an upcoming news story, whether the bishop gets appointed or whether the diocese gets merged. So more on that at a later date. Pope Francis held a consistory on September 30th. He created 21 new Francis cardinals. The turnout of the faithful was abysmal. It is an indicator of the lack of enthusiasm from the faithful in regards to the Francis Church. And on the same day, the turnout, as Gloria TV reports, the turnout of people for Francis's ecumenical vigil, entitled Together, before his synod, was even worse than for the morning consistory. And you can see these links in the description. You can see for yourself at the links in the description. St. Peter's Square was nearly empty. Francis arrived in a wheelchair and was immediately joined by Constantinople Patriarch Bartholomew. During the show, he sat in a row with other non-Catholic religious officials, such as Anglican lay Archbishop Justin Welby, who was dressed in pink. All right. Francis was busy because just days prior to the synod, he met once again with Father James Martin S.J., who is due to take part in the synod as a voting member. And Martin tweeted, and the Vatican didn't issue any what would you say? Didn't issue anything contrary to what he says, so you have to go with what Martin says. Like, that's what the Vatican does. Anyway, Martin said, I'm grateful for a visit with the Holy Father today where we had a wonderful in-depth conversation at the Casa Santa Marta. I'm so grateful for his gracious welcome. James Martin says that Pope Francis has consistently expressed his support for Martin and his evil nonsense. The Vatican has never released statements counter to what James Martin said, and so we can go with what Martin says because he was the one in the meeting who's reporting everything, and the Vatican's not disputing anything that he says. So it's pretty obvious that Pope Francis supports James Martin until Pope Francis says anything against him. That's what we're that's sort of natural to believe that. Oh no, Francis doesn't support James Martin. Oh yeah, he meets with him all the time and handwrites letters to him. And oh yeah, Martin issued a Dubia years ago, and Pope Francis responded and more or less supported his ministry. So there you go. There's the Francis Church. All right, Kissy Fernandez, who was just named a cardinal. Yay! He said the synod will not discuss celibacy. Oh, well, he said, yeah, the synod will not discuss celibacy, the ordination of women, heresy, or things like that. Each of these issues would require a lot of study, prior study, regional discussions, and then a whole synod or two, he explained. But he promises that this could happen next year, saying that the synod can make a request to study such a topic. He expects that the synod will not be interesting for the press and may sound like a failure or an irrelevant meeting. Well, it already is a failure, but he says it will not be interesting for the press. So certainly that's something to hope for. And he knows. I mean, he's an insider on this stuff, so we'll see. We'll see, but they could, with all of the horribly heretical characters that are gathering at the synod, you'd have to think that some of these topics are going to be discussed. Much counter to what this counter to what Kissy is saying. All right, more about the synod. Synod voting member, I talked about her this last time. Synod voting member Julia Osika is a 22-year-old junior at St. Joseph's University, so a college student who was appointed to this synod as a voting member. She's at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. She calls herself a feminist and believes women and LMNOPQ plus people should have greater roles in the church. So, Catholic News Agency profiled her. I guess they had an interview with her, and how was she appointed to this? Like, it's really an interesting question, because you take any random college student, although people say, oh yeah, she wasn't a random college student, because they're not going to select college students who attend the Latin Mass, which many of them do. They wouldn't select any of those. They wouldn't select any college students who actually believe in the Catholic Church. They will select someone who calls herself a feminist. Oh, not a man either. Ooh, shouldn't say that. They'll select someone who calls herself a feminist and believes women and LMNOPQ plus people should have greater roles in the church, because that's the narrative. But the problem is, you could select any random pagan on a college campus, and they would say that. That's what you stand for. I mean, that's what a lot of, and they don't pretend to be Catholic. So they could have selected anyone, but they selected this person. So that's, I don't know, kind of weird, kind of really kind of weird. But if you get free room and board and free meals, and I don't know. I don't know. I really personally have no interest in visiting Rome, at least at this point. I would not. I'd be not an exorcist. I'd be very scared. Let's just say that. Seems like a pretty evil place at this point, especially after the Pachamama thing. All right, also of note, there are numerous people who are angry about Francis's support of Rupnik. I reported that last week, including synodal participants. This has the potential to completely overshadow the synod. Synod participant Christina Enogus Sands, a woman, she says that Rupnik is being protected in Rome and can do anything he likes. This is coming from a female synod participant. That's pretty significant. She's criticizing indirectly or indirectly, she's criticizing Pope Francis. That's got to be concerning for the Francis Church. They have the Rupnik scandal hanging over their heads, for sure, and now they have a Dubia hanging over their heads. So this Dubia. So remember, there was a previous Dubia. Was it 5 years ago? I don't know, by Burke. No, it was Burke and Brandmuller and two cardinals who are no longer alive. But Burke and Brandmuller followed it up, and they combined forces with Cardinal Robert Serra and Cardinal Joseph Zen, and also a cardinal who I was unfamiliar with, Cardinal Juan Sandoval Iniguez? Anyway. Sandoval Iniguez, he's 90 years old, and I believe Brandmuller and Zen are close to that age. So, literally, we're talking about pre-Vatican II, right? They would actually remember the Old Mass before Vatican II. And of course, they're free to say the Old Mass whenever they would like, and some of them take advantage of that. Burke and Sarah are the young ones in this group, and both of them are in their 70s. So they sent a Dubia to the Vatican on July 10th of this year. Pope Francis responded on July 11th, one day later after these 5 cardinals sent a Dubia. They believed his responses were inadequate, and so they submitted another Dubia on August 21st. They said they submitted a reformulated Dubia with yes/no questions. They were like, because Pope Francis responded with open-ended answers, which means nothing. So they answered it in the yes/no format, or they asked their questions so that it could be answered in a yes/no format. You say, well, that was too confusing for you, so we're going to ask you some very basic questions, and will you answer it? And the Vatican, so with this, let's take a step back. With this letter that they released today, this is the first time these cardinals released publicly their Dubia. They had not released it publicly until now. Because Pope Francis had not answered their reissued Dubia, re-released Dubia, or resent Dubia. August 21st until now, he answered it in one day the first time, he ignored it the second time until now. And they withheld the answers to give the Vatican an opportunity to release straightforward answers. Now the Vatican simply today, as soon immediately after these cardinals publicly released their Dubia, the Vatican reissued or just released their answer from July 11th So they didn't provide any new answers. They simply provided the full answers that they gave for the first one, which was ambiguous. And actually, it seems to suggest that Pope Francis is in support of LMNOP blessings. This is where we're at. Okay, so the reformatted one they asked, it asked whether, okay, after statements of some bishops, which have been neither corrected nor retracted, it is asked whether in the church divine revelation should be reinterpreted according to the cultural changes of our time and according to the new anthropological vision that these changes promote, or whether divine revelation is binding, forever, immutable, therefore not to be contradicted. Okay, that's question 1. Question 2, can the church derogate from this principle? What was the principle? Oh, LMNOP. LMNOP unions cannot be blessed. Can the church derogate from this principle, considering it contrary to what Veritatis Splendor 103 taught as a mere ideal, and accepting as a possible good objectively sinful situations such as LMNOP unions without betraying revealed doctrine? All right, so question 3. It is asked whether synodality can be the supreme regulative criterion of the permanent government of the church without distorting her constitutive order willed by her founder. Okay. Question 4. Okay, it is. So they asked about the common priesthood of the faithful. Is it still valid that the common priesthood of the faithful differ and the ministerial or hierarchical priesthood differ essentially and not only in degree? And it is furthermore asked whether the teaching of John Paul II's apostolic letter Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, which teaches as a truth to be definitively held the impossibility of conferring a priestly ordination on women, is still valid. Now, I wish they would say diaconate, because that's basically ordination of women, or any ordination of women is heresy. So very clearly, but they're asking Francis if he believes that, and which, I mean, you're not getting a straightforward answer from them, from Francis. He's not going to give a straightforward answer on that, or LMNOP blessings, and he appears to support LMNOP blessings. All right, 5th question is ask whether the teaching of the Council of Trent, according to which the contrition of the penitent is still necessary for the validity of sacramental confession, is still in force. So Francis indicated a few days ago that that priests should forgive all sins, no exceptions, and this seems to contradict that. So this statement by the Council of Trent seems to contradict that. So Francis contradicted the Council of Trent. No surprise. No surprise. Okay. So they said, we therefore repropose our questions to you, said Francis, so that they can be answered with a simple yes or no. Because, like everything in the past 50 years, it's ambiguous. Francis's answers were ambiguous. Is it possible for the Church today to teach doctrines contrary to those she has previously taught in matters of faith and morals, whether by the Pope ex cathedra or in definitions of an ecumenical council and ordinary universal magisterium of the bishops dispersed throughout the world? Is it possible in some circumstances a pastor could bless unions between LMNOP persons, thus suggesting that LMNOP behavior as such would not be contrary to God's law and the person's journey toward God? Does the teaching upheld by the universal ordinary magisterium that every sexual act outside of marriage, and in particular LMNOP acts, constitutes an objectively grave sin against God's law, regardless of the circumstances? Will the Synod of Bishops to be held in Rome? Which includes only a chosen representation of pastors and faithful exercise in the doctrinal or pastoral matters on which it will be called to express itself, the supreme authority of the Church, which belongs exclusively to the Roman Pontiff. Could the Church in the future confer priestly ordination on women, thus contradicting the exclusive reservation of the sacrament to baptize males? And can a penitent who, while admitting a sin, refuses to make in any way the intention not to commit it again, validly receive sacramental absolution? So they actually they asked the question. They said, let's put it in really basic terms where you don't have to do anything except answer yes or no to 5 questions. Yes or no? Yes? No? Okay. It's like a true-false quiz. I mean, you finish it really quick, right? When you guys were in school, did you have true or false quizzes? When you take a true or false quiz, they're the hardest thing. I mean, I had professors that really intentionally tried to confuse people with true or false quizzes. And there is very confusing because you could pick one word out and it would change the entire meaning. But these are not trick questions. These are basic questions of the Catholic faith, and any Catholic should be able to answer these very easily. It's a yes, no, true, false. Yes, no, true, false questions. All right. And of course the Vatican, they released their ambiguous answers. And all right, so I don't see their answers. The Pope responded, and Francis's response to the LMNOP question. He said equating marriage to blessing LMNOP couples would give rise to confusion and so should be avoided, but the Cardinals said their concern is different. Namely, that the blessing of LMNOP couples might create confusion in any case. Hold on one second. Let me go to, there we go. So Francis answered the Dubia, and I'm going to Gloria TV. I'm pulling up the article. Whether divine, okay, so here's his answers from, they just republished the answers that he gave to the Cardinals. The Vatican just published Francis' answers that he gave to the Cardinals. And, hold on. All right. He gave the Cardinals in July. And so the question 1, whether divine revelation can be reinterpreted. Francis said, while it is true that divine revelation is immutable and always binding, the Church must be humble and recognize it never exhausts its unfathomable riches and needs to grow in its understanding. So basically, I mean, people can interpret that as doctrine can change. Okay, whether LMNOP unions can be blessed. Francis said that LMNOP unions cannot be called marriage. However, in dealing with people, pastoral charity must not be lost, made up of kindness, patience, tenderness, and encouragement. We cannot become judges who deny, reject, exclude. Pastoral prudence must discern forms of blessings requested by one or more persons that do not transmit mistaken concept of marriage. Persons in objectively, morally not acceptable situations should not be treated as sinners. So basically, he supports it, right? That would indicate that he does. Question 3, whether synodality replaces the authority of the papacy. Francis replied that the Dubia submitted by the Cardinals themselves claim some form of synodality in exercise of papal ministry. Okay, well, who really knows? Question 4, can the Church ordain women to the priesthood? Francis replied, a clear and authoritative doctrine about the exact nature of a definitive statement has not yet been exhaustively developed. So he supports it, or at least you can interpret it that way. and whether a penitent can be absolved from sins without contrition. Francis replies that repentance is necessary for the validity of sacramental absolution, but the confessional is not a custom house. Already approaching confession is a symbolic expression of repentance. So you can see why they ask yes-no questions. And I'm going to say they're not going to get yes-no answers or any answers. In fact, the Vatican, I'm sure they believe that their answer will maybe quiet some of the critics. Okay. Only 5. Well, come on, we're going to take what we can get. Romans, stop being rigid, the one. Okay. Kissy Fernandez answered the Dubia for Francis. Okay. All right. Please comment on Vigano being a prima donna. Okay, so yeah, the Catholic Identity Conference was this past weekend, as far as I know. I don't go to that. I don't know. It's hard to make arrangements. I should. It's not super far from where I live, but anyway, yeah, Vigano basically went set of a contest, and Michael Matt basically canceled him from going. And I haven't followed the rest of the story, so I can't really comment with an educated opinion on that. I'd have to look at the facts. And the thing with Vigano, he's very long-winded. Michael Matt posted a 10-minute video explanation. I don't care. Like, if he posted like a 1-minute video to say, okay, we didn't, we uninvited Vigano because of this, whatever, then it is, it is, I don't know. I'd watch it, but 9 minutes, I didn't feel like watching a 9-minute explanation and have everyone go into details about unimportant details. So what we do know is this synod is crazy. I will have much more news next week, and this Dubia is an ongoing story. I want to talk about the significance of this. I actually didn't get to it yet. But the really important point here is the 5 Dubia Cardinals. So one is a new one that I've never heard of. The one sounds like he has a Hispanic name. I'm not entirely. I have to Google him or Wikipedia him. He has a Wikipedia page, but he is very old, 90 years old. So that is that. But Sarah, okay, so Burke and Brandmuller are original Dubia Cardinals. Cardinal Sarah has not spoken out really against anything until now, which is great. Like to see more of it. And more frequently, too. Cardinal Sarah wrote about silence, and he's been mostly silent. He wrote a book about silence. He's been mostly silent, but now he's silent no more. And that's a good thing. Cardinal Zen, very hesitant to criticize Pope Francis, but in this case, good on him. He blamed the Vatican-Chinese deal exclusively on Parolin, no responsibility to Francis. But now, coming out of his shell a little bit, he has nothing to lose. These guys have nothing to lose. They're approaching their judgment quickly, especially the ones that are close to 90 years old. I think at least, Sandoval Iniguez, Cardinal Zen and Brandmuller, I think they're all 90. Could be wrong. Maybe Brandmuller's like 88 or something, but 3 of them are in their 90s, but seems like they're still in very sound mind, which is great because we need guidance from them in these tricky times that we live in. I don't know if that's quite the word I want to use, but need to see more of it. And so I'm glad they'll step up and You know, what do they have? What else do they have to do? They're all retired. So I hope they keep on this train. You know, keep knocking on the door, and Vatican, as far as it seems like, as far as the Vatican is concerned, case is closed on their end. So now it's back at balls in the court of these Dubia Cardinals. Are they going to keep pushing the issue and say that's not a sufficient answer? Because if you look at it from basic common sense perspective, and you look at Francis's answers, you can easily see why these cardinals said, there's you know significant amount of ambiguity in his answers, so much so that it implies what would be contrary to church teaching. So that's why they re-released the Dubia. So that's just how it goes. And more to come. Much more to come. Okay. Well, this has been EVTN News, and thank you for joining me, everyone. And until next time, and next week, so I'm not completely sure I will be doing EVTN on Monday of next week. I know it's we'll see what the weather's like and where I'm able to go, if I'm able to go somewhere or enjoy the outdoors at a certain point. This is a nice time of year, especially October. In this region, the Northeast region, the leaves change colors, and it's a great time to just really enjoy the outdoors. So stay tuned. I will be doing a show at some point early next week. Just don't know when. Watch for your notifications, and it'll be there. But until next time, this has been EVTN News. Thank you so much for watching. We are the laity. We will not be silent.